All right, let's get into it. The story you're about to hear comes from a listener named Chloe, and it's a terrifying account of her family's experience in the beautiful, haunted city of New Orleans. This isn't a tale of vampires or voodoo queens, but something far more insidious, a dream that became a waking nightmare. A story of an old house that refused to be forgotten. It's been more than a decade since these events took place, but Chloe says the memory is as sharp as broken glass. It all began in the suffocating heat of a Louisiana summer. Back in June of 2013, Chloe had one all-consuming goal: to open her own business. She envisioned a small, bright cafe serving fresh smoothies, with a professional recording studio tucked inside. For months, she searched relentlessly. And finally, she found it, a house on a quiet street, a mere whisper away from the lively, bustling French Quarter. In her eyes, it was a blank canvas, the perfect foundation for her future. The house was a vision, grand, spacious, and filled with a kind of forgotten elegance. The rent was steep, a daunting $4,000 a month, but for the dream she held, it seemed a worthy price. To reach the entrance, you had to walk down a narrow, private alleyway that belonged exclusively to the property. The building was large, with a charming rock garden out front that seemed to welcome you. But the real showstopper was the entire second floor, which was walled with magnificent panes of glass. Chloe saw it immediately. That would be the cafe, bathed in the rich, natural light of the New Orleans sun. When she first laid eyes on the place, her mind was buzzing only with possibilities, floor plans, color schemes, and the endless promise of a new life. The alley, though a bit hidden and small, didn't register as a flaw. In her mind, it was a quaint feature, a perfect nook for customers to park their bicycles, or maybe a spot for a charming outdoor table. The thought of anything supernatural, anything dark and lurking, was the furthest thing from her mind. But from the very first moment they began to move their lives into that house, a subtle, disquieting feeling began to settle over them. Something felt off. It was a cold, quiet dread that no amount of optimism could seem to chase away. On their first day, her husband, Alex, was at his regular job. Chloe was alone in the cavernous house, surrounded by a sea of boxes, trying to carve out a home from the chaos. By lunchtime, a gnawing hunger had set in. She walked out of the quiet alley and across the street to a little food truck shed noticed parked there. She ordered a sandwich, and the woman running the truck, a friendly lady with a warm, welcoming smile, struck up a conversation with her. She asked if Chloe was the new owner of the house or if she was just renting. Chloe let out a laugh and told her, "Oh, just renting. It's $4,000 a month. I could never in a million years afford to buy a place like that." The woman's smile didn't just fade, it vanished, replaced by a look of deep concern that seemed to age her face. She leaned forward over the counter, and her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Honey, why on earth would you ever rent that house?" Chloe was completely taken aback, a nervous tremor starting in her gut. "What do you mean?" she asked, a nervous laugh catching in her throat. "That house is haunted," the woman said, her eyes wide and serious, a shadow passing over her face. "Nobody who moves in there ever makes it. People get scared out of their wits in the middle of the night. I saw one family. They only lasted a single week before they fled. They just ran out of there, abandoning their security deposit and everything they couldn't carry. They never came back." A cold, spider-like feeling trickled down Chloe's spine. Really? She pressed, her voice barely a whisper. Can you tell me what happened? The woman nodded grimly, her expression etched with sorrow. A long time ago, a woman lived in that house. She was pregnant, expecting her first child, and her husband was away on a business trip. One night, she went into labor, all alone, in that big, empty house. She had a weak heart, you see. And during the delivery, the strain was just too much for her. The moment the baby was born, she died from a massive heart attack. The poor infant died, too, when her husband finally returned home. That's what he found, his wife and his newborn child. Both gone. Chloe was horrified. The story felt like a physical blow. That's just awful, she whispered. Yes, it is, the woman affirmed, her voice heavy with the weight of the tale. Many people have tried to make a go of it there, living or running a business. Every single one of them has left with nothing but broken dreams and empty pockets. Chloe tried to push the fear away, to wrap herself in a flimsy shield of logic. Well, she said, forcing a confidence into her voice that she did not feel, I am only renting. I don't mean any harm to anyone who might still be there. Maybe if I show some respect. You know, buy some flowers and make a small offering. We can coexist. Who knows, she added, a desperate hope in her voice. Maybe she'll even bring me good luck. The woman just shook her head slowly, a pitying look in her eyes. Maybe. You can certainly try. Perhaps if you're a good fit for her, she'll protect you and help your business. Chloe went back to the house, the sandwich sitting like a stone in her stomach, and told Alex and her friends the story. They all just laughed it off as local superstition. But the lease was already signed. The deposit paid. Their hands were tied. Even so, Alex agreed that it couldn't hurt to be respectful. Maybe we will be a good fit for the house, he said, trying to reassure them both. And so, they set up a small shelf on the second floor. It wasn't a formal altar, but they placed a beautiful vase there, which they made a solemn promise to always keep filled with fresh flowers. They would light a candle, and sometimes, feeling foolish but compelled, Chloe would speak to the spirit. She told her about their dreams for the cafe, about their family, and that they meant her no harm, that they only wanted to bring life and happiness back to her home. She even cooked an entire chicken and left a plate for her on the shelf, a humble gesture of goodwill. But during their entire time in that house, their business was a complete and utter, soul-crushing failure. It was baffling. Chloe and her husband were at a loss. They couldn't understand it. They wanted to leave, to cut their losses and run. But for some inexplicable reason, whenever they spoke about breaking the lease and moving out, something would happen that made it impossible. They felt trapped, bound to that place. They had poured so much of their savings into it, buying expensive equipment for the recording studio, outfitting the cafe and smoothie bar. But they had no customers. No one ever came. It was as if the house itself was invisible to the outside world, as if its presence was shrouded from all who would have entered. As for the ghost, Chloe never once laid eyes on her, but she heard her. The house had an external iron staircase that snaked up to the second floor, a rusty, spiraling cage against the side of the building. Nearly every single night, after the city had fallen quiet, she would hear loud, heavy, deliberate footsteps clanging up and down those stairs. Bang, bang, bang. The cold, metallic sound would echo through the house, jarring her from sleep. But whenever she would rush to the window and look, there was never anyone there. And Chloe learned one thing about the spirit very quickly. She despised a mess. On nights when Chloe was too exhausted to wash the dinner dishes or take out the trash, the ghost would throw a tantrum. It sounded like someone was in the kitchen, furiously rattling plates and clattering silverware, making a tremendous racket. It wasn't a subtle sound. It was a loud, angry protest. Chloe would only ever hear the sounds, never see a thing. The only person who ever saw her was their part-time cleaning lady. One evening, she came to Chloe, her face a pale mask of terror, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "Chloe," she said, her voice shaking. "I saw her last night. She opened my bedroom door and she came into my room. She lay down on the bed right next to me." Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. "What did she look like?" she asked, her own voice a strained whisper. Her hair was so long. She breathed. It went all the way down past her waist. She didn't say anything at first. She just lay there, staring at me. And then she asked me, "Where are you from?" I was so scared. I could barely speak. I told her I was just the help, that the real owners lived in the other room. She pointed a shaky, trembling finger towards Chloe's bedroom door. Chloe didn't know if she was telling the truth or if Shed simply had a vivid, terrifying nightmare. But the story chilled her to the bone. Then, one morning, something happened that was so violent, so undeniably real, that it shattered their last vestiges of denial. Chloe woke up around 5 in the morning, which was her usual time. She rolled over and saw that her husband, Alex, wasn't in bed beside her. She got up, a sense of unease prickling her skin, and found him lying face down on the bedroom floor. She rushed over and carefully turned him onto his back. His entire face was a mask of blood. It was caked and dried from his eyes all the way up into his hairline. His head was covered in angry, swelling lumps, and one of his eyes was already swelling shut, blooming into a deep, dark, violent purple. Panic seized Chloe. "Alex, what happened? What's wrong with you? My God, why is there so much blood?" He slowly, painfully opened his one good eye and looked at her, his expression dazed, lost, and utterly confused. I don't know," he mumbled, his voice thick and slurred. Chloe was completely frantic, her mind racing. She left him lying there while she rushed their 2 kids to school. When she got back, she sat him down and demanded he tell her exactly what happened. "Was there a break-in?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Did you get into a fight with a burglar?" "No," he said, shaking his head, the movement causing him to wince in pain. "I don't know what it was. Last night, I got up to go to the bathroom. As soon as I walked in, I felt a pair of hands grab my head and just slam it, hard, down onto the porcelain sink. Oh my God," Chloe breathed, the air leaving her lungs. "You must have seen who it was. It had to have been a burglar." "No," he insisted, his voice raw with a terrifying conviction. "I didn't see anyone. The light was on. I was completely alone in there. Something grabbed my head and just smashed it, over and over and over, into the sink. I tried to fight back, to push myself up, but the harder I fought, the harder they slammed my head down. The force, it was incredible. I couldn't resist it. The side of his forehead was a mess of swollen, purple lumps. There was a deep, jagged gash above his eye where the blood had poured from. He said he was beaten relentlessly until he lost consciousness, collapsing right there on the cold bathroom floor. When he finally came to, disoriented and in agony, he had just managed to crawl back into the bedroom before collapsing again. Chloe was paralyzed by a fear more profound than any she had ever known. How could a ghost be that strong? How could it physically, brutally harm someone like that? To this day, Alex still has the scar on his face from that night. Chloe didn't know what to think. Was it a ghost? Or was it a burglar? But the doors were locked. There were no signs of a break-in. And not a single thing was stolen. And Alex was adamant he had seen no one. Chloe was at her wit's end, drowning in fear and confusion. She decided she needed a professional. She found a spiritual medium, a well-known man who worked out of a small, incense-filled shop in the French Quarter. She went to him and poured out the entire horrifying story. As soon as she described the house and its location, he closed his eyes. After a long, unnerving silence, he looked at her, his expression grave. "You need to find a way to leave that house," he said, his voice low and serious. "The spirit there, the one from the land itself, is furious. She feels that you have trespassed on her property. She is very angry." Chloe felt her world collapsing. She had poured every last cent of their savings into that business. If they left now, they would be completely, irrevocably broke. The medium shook his head slowly. "If you stay in that house, your life will only continue to spiral downward. You will never, ever succeed there." His words hit Chloe with the force of a physical blow. She realized with a sickening lurch that ever since they had moved in, their family's health had been in a constant state of collapse. Chloe almost never gets sick, but in that house, she was constantly battling a high fever, sometimes spiking to 104 degrees. She would be so weak she couldn't even sit up in bed. Her 2 young daughters, who were normally healthy, energetic children, were sick almost every single day. Out of a 30-day month, they would be sick for 25 of those days. A miserable cycle of doctor's visits and hospital stays. Chloe felt so utterly trapped. They had signed a 1-year lease. If they broke it, they would lose their deposit for all the remaining months, tens of thousands of dollars. She was torn. Half of her wanted to pack a bag and run without looking back. And the other half, the stubborn, prideful half, wanted to stay and fight for the dream she had invested everything in. She went home and told Alex what the medium had said. "We have to go," he said immediately, his voice devoid of hesitation. "We can't fight this. We cannot live like this." Chloe saw other psychics, other spiritual advisors. She even went to a church in the next district over, begging for help, for someone to come and cleanse the house. But they all refused. They all told her the same chilling thing: "Leave. The land belongs to her. She has a claim to it, and she has blinded it to any success. You will never be able to make a living there." At that point, they were living downstairs and had rented out the beautiful, glass-walled second floor to try and cover the crushing rent. But things only got worse. All Chloe wanted to do in that house was sleep. She slept constantly. A deep, heavy, unnatural sleep from which she never felt rested. She had no energy, no motivation, Alex became a shadow of his former self, his face growing thin and gaunt. Her daughters were pale and sickly, their laughter gone, and still. They couldn't leave. It was as if the house itself held them captive. Every single time they discussed moving out while they were inside those walls, something would happen. A sudden, catastrophic financial problem would appear from nowhere. An unexpected, debilitating illness would strike one of them. Something, always, would happen to make it impossible for them to go. Finally, her husband and she started meeting outside the house. Like fugitives, they would go to Jackson Square, sit on a public bench surrounded by strangers, and talk. They were both devastated. They had lost so much money. They had failed so completely. "What are we going to do?" Chloe asked him one day, tears of desperation streaming down her face. "We just have to leave," he said, his voice firm. They remembered the medium's chilling warning. Don't talk about it in the house. Just pack your things and go. So that's what they did. They orchestrated their escape. They sent their daughters to stay with Chloe's mother. They called a moving company. And in one frantic, desperate whirlwind of a day, they packed up everything they could physically carry and they left. They abandoned furniture, expensive studio equipment, anything that wouldn't fit in that first and only truckload. They didn't dare go back for a second trip. They lived in that house for 7 months. 7 months. That felt like a lifetime. And in those 7 months, they lost more than just money. They lost other things, too. Deeply personal things Chloe says she can't talk about here, because this is a public forum. But she's telling you this story as a solemn warning. When you rent or buy a house, especially for a business, please, she begs, do your research. Find out the history of the place, because sometimes you can find the perfect location. You can have the perfect plan. But if the energy of the place is against you, if there is a spirit there that does not want you there, you will fail. Thinking back on this story, even now, still makes Chloe emotional. It was a very, very dark time for her family. For any of you listening who don't believe her, who think this is just a story, if you truly want to know where this house is, you can send her a private message. She will give you the exact address. She doesn't want to post it publicly and cause any trouble for the current owner. But if you want to find out for yourself, she will tell you where to go. Thank you for listening.